This is going to be one of the more easier ones today because it's pretty straightforward. I'm really humbled and amazed at the brain trust that I see in these meetings. I was in the business world, and so I was part of those associations that paid lobbyists to take care of our technology business. That's as close as I got to paid taxes. Um, but as I retired and moved to Arizona, you can only play so much golf. And this has been on my mind for some time, term limits. There's all of these are great ideas, but what really appealed to me about term limits coming from the business world is it's simple, it's easy. In fact, when you take a look at the popularity of term limits, I'm amazed at the popularity. If it was up to the voters, this would be done by now. Over 80% average overall. Actually, our biggest growth, these are our two new polls from McLaughlin and Rasmussen, and we do these on a statewide basis. Our latest polls, the biggest growth has been with independents and Democrats. We've always been popular among Republicans, but now all of a sudden we're starting to see that move forward. And in the business world, this would be called a monopoly. We worked real hard to get a 35% business model because that was a major market. And here we got, and a lot of these poll in this high 80% level. And we need to really realize how popular this is and how that it can really move forward. We've been here for a long time. I've been here a couple of years, so I'm the newbie in the group. But 23 states, we worked with 23 states to term limit their own delegation. And then that was challenged by the U.S. Supreme Court in U.S. term limits versus Thornton. And they basically said, hey, this needs to be just like the 22nd Amendment that limits the president. So you have to really start over and do that. And that's the whole idea of what we want to do. And that's why it's so simple. We want to limit both houses of Congress, just like the 22nd that limits the president. It's that simple. And we'll do whatever's necessary to get that done. As you know, we've had several sponsors of our bills in Congress. This year in the 117th Congress, Ted Cruz, along with 10 other sponsors, sponsored Senate Joint Resolution 3. And in the House, Representative Norman, along with about 50 other co-signers, sponsored the House Resolution 12. And so we do that. That's been going on for years and years and years. It never makes it anywhere because it's not going to. It's just not going to change because they're not going to vote to limit themselves through Congress. So why term limits? Number one, it really will disrupt the lobbyist relationship. We have quite a bit of information on our site on Jack Abenoff, and he's actually done a white paper for us and really talked about the difference between politicians that come in for a stipulated period of time that have a legacy that they want to complete within that 2 or 3 term period, as opposed to politicians coming into office and from day one need to raise at least $45,000 a day. And the important thing is most of the Congress people, both houses, leave in 10, 11 years because they realize that they're basically just pulling a stick on the voting. The agenda that they came to execute on will never be heard because they're competing with people. We have 40 members of the House that have been there for 40 years. 40 years. Now, my last engagement, we sold a company to Cisco, was with Cisco. And as good as John Chambers was, he got old and it was time to make that change. And they did, and the company benefited for it. And that's what's going to happen here. It'll dismantle the seniority system. You can imagine when you take a look at the leadership in the committee, if you're not there 20, 30 years, with the exception of the Republicans, you're not going to get a chance. And so it really does dismantle the seniority system. Term limits increases the voter turnout. We see that in open races all the time. This is a new phenomenon for me. We take a look. In fact, we really look for those open races because that's where the excitement is. And if we knew that every 2 or 3 terms you were going to have fresh blood, you'd see more voter activity in that. Participation too. I mean, people get behind new politicians that are running for office. Reduce the institutional inertia. Congress is not going to fix this. It's not in their best interest to fix it. They really do not have the power to fix it. They just can't get together enough, nor would they want to get this fixed. I'm going to point out just a few points now. This comes from one of our pages called Debunking Myths. And you can go to this. There's at least 48 of these, and they even have QR codes for those that are attention deficit. And you can just click on that, and it'll bring up all the support and information that you need. But number one, I want to mention, Congress has introduced over 12,000 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The next one that the states do will be the first one. We talked about that. And we really do need to do that. We need to make it happen. But the good news is there were 33 2/3 proposed amendments that went through Congress. 6 of them failed. And out of those 33, 17 started with the state. The state has had influence. And typically what happens when Congress sees the writing on the wall, then they start to act. Whether they're going to do on term limits, I'm not so sure about that. Term limits provides voters number 34. You can go right to these sites and pick up the background for more choices on the ballot. In Ballotpedia in the 2016, only had 23 non-incumbents, new runners. And it did a little better in 18, and we know why, and that moved up to 83. It's dismal. It's dismal. We find a lot of local races where they're not even a challenger. And term limits will help reduce big money in elections and politics. More than 97% of PAC money goes to incumbents. Not even counting the franking privileges, the name recognition, all the things that go along with that, you can see that it's almost impossible. In fact, you heard Nick earlier say with a 15% approval rate, in what world do you end up getting a 97% reelection? It just doesn't happen in the real world. It's a ticket to the fights, and it just never happens. Congress won't term limit themselves. It's just not going to happen. State legislatures are unique, and it really shows that Congress can't do this. Supreme Court can't do this. It takes 38 states. This is the ultimate authority in states. States have got to step up and seize and execute on this authority given to them. It was there for a reason, and it's to stop exactly what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. And state legislatures have a unique understanding of their constituents and what the federal government does to those constituents. Summary, Congress can't fix itself. We must get at least 34 states to call for an Article 5 convention, and it's got to be successful. It has to be. You won't get another chance, or at least for another 100 years. We saw what happened when they get a little loose. And with the Equal Rights Amendment, that was going on for 100 years, still not settled. And so we can't have that happen. By getting the state Article 5, you start right out of the bucket with 34 states. So now you only have to get 4 more, and it's very important, and it really sends the message. Term limits on the president has been road tested. Nobody would say that that was a bad idea. It's been exactly probably one of the more popular amendments on that. And term limits is easy to consider. All you got to do is figure out how long and how deep. And so when you take a look at what happens to some of these more complex amendment proposals, as they start to add complexity to it, they start to lose support. So my urging to you is, let's pick one that we can win. Let's get together. Let's make sure that we really focus. And we do need to work together. I agree with that. And I really believe in the balanced budget amendment. I think it's a very important thing to happen. And we do need to make it happen. But let's set it up like dominoes. Let's get one done, right behind that another one, right behind that another one, and right behind that another one. I really appreciate being able to do this. We got involved late. We'll be more active moving forward. And we got a lot better talent in my organization than me. So I appreciate your patience.
So if we can bring up, you can see the poll result from the prior question on restoring power to set limits. You can see that result up there. Do we have the poll? Ron, if you'd stick around here, we'll just see if we got a question. And then can we get that other polling result coming up, or the polling question coming up? While that's coming up, let's go ahead and take a question or two, and then we've got our final presentation.
Thank you for the presentation. First question, how many years should the term be? And then secondly, I would say that this is something that the states really ought to have an incentive to do because it's upward mobility for state legislators. All right. And the only way it's going to happen is through an Article 5. So, but how many years? Because there are a number of states that have passed term limits, and in some cases they've been too short to where in effect it's served to further empower the staff and to get people focused on what am I going to run for next, because I can only keep this for e.g. 6 years.
Exactly. Great question. So two things going on in our congressional bills and that are sponsored by Senator Cruz and Representative Norman. Those are fixed. So they're suggesting 3 years in the House and 2 years in the Senate.
I mean, 3 terms, so
Terms,
6 and
terms,
12.
Excuse me. Yeah,
6.
3 terms in the House and 2 terms in the Senate. So you could go, 6 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate and end up spending 18 years if you really wanted to do that, and that would be over. But under the Article 5 state convention, that needs to be decided by the state convention. And we've left that open for that reason alone. So we don't want that to be the hangup. I mean, you get into these arguments between whether it should be 3 terms for the House or 4 terms for the House. We don't want that to stop this discussion. We can get by that. That's a little problem. And so we want to make sure that that's decided at the House. And the reason that the Democrat and the independents are moving so fast is they realize that there's no room at the top for the up and comers. We don't get the best and brightest. We get the opportunist. And over a period of time, nobody wants to spend 40 years in DC. They have it was the way it was meant to be at the beginning, that you went there for a period of time, you passed laws, you came back home, and you lived under those same laws that you passed. That's not happening anymore. And we're losing our best and our brightest.
Thank you, Ron.